Didn't even say hello. Just started rolling.
God.
What do you got, Michael?
I'm so upset because I think
Why are you?
there might have been
buddy.
some kind of miscommunication.
Oh, not a miscommunication on this podcast? What's
movie
that?
were we supposed to watch?
We were supposed to watch Wes Anderson's A Life Aquatic.
Oh, no. Abe.
Yeah?
I watched Punch Drunk Love. I'm one behind.
That's not true. We already talked about Punch Drunk Love, Michael.
No, I watched Bunka for that.
No,
this time I watched Punch Drunk Love.
Oh, that's right. Wow, you actually, yeah.
Yeah, that's right universe, wrong time frame this time.
I don't even know how to yes and that bit.
I don't even know what people who join in the middle because they like a particular movie make of that voice, because it started as a groan of panic and now it's just a sound.
Yeah. Yeah, now you're just a cartoon.
It's an abstracted sound, yeah.
But yeah, you heard it from Michael, I guess.
Mm-hmm. The obligatory bit. Yeah.
Andersons. We're back again. Your monthly installment of two different Anderson directors. This time it's Wes, and this time it's The Life Aquatic. Woo!
A set of sons brought to you by another set of sons, Abe Epperson and Michelson. And yeah, let's just dive into it. This was 2004, co-written with Noah Baumbach. So and people who know Wes Anderson's oeuvre know that this is an interesting new phase and an interesting film. I don't want to give should we just dive into the spectra, Abe, or do you want to give little overall impressions? Sometimes depending on my impressions, like to tease you with them up top. Sometimes I like them to come out organically. How are you feeling?
I like the organic thing, but I do want to start doing a thing, which I think is in the as you were saying about like people are just jumping in. I think we got into the stage that I was thinking about it last night when I was watching this and making notes. It might be good to do kind of like not a recap, but just like, for example, I think it would be good for me to say the following. Like,
and I'm going to say it now.
So I'm going to do it
here
now.
We go.
Which is that, like, so we're a few movies into Wes Anderson's career at this point. I think we're like at 5 each. And we're starting to see like cameras developing now. There's more motion. The sets are more elaborate and lived in. These are my takeaways, but also like I think that anyone who's watching the films in order like we have, you can see geography as a whole is more paid attention to. In the past, we're like Anderson would be in a shot that moves to a new location. Then there's another shot, like these little vignettes that make up his filmmaking montage, like the fabric of his pen, so to speak,
sequence
or whatever.
Of postcards, yeah.
Yeah, like they are themselves developing, becoming more complex, and I think that that's a cool thing to note. Just that after a few movies, and we'll do the same when we talk about Paul Thomas Anderson next month, how he's developing.
When you have an auteur director who really does wield a lot of control, for better or worse, I gotta say it is very gratifying, and you learn so much doing this, which is not something I normally did before I became a podcaster about 5 years ago. I would never watch a director's works in order for any reason, you know? And I would watch them based on the subject or my interest and hop around until I had seen them all or most of them of whatever director I was interested in. And watching them in order, it's really like watching a TV, like I used to catch Seinfeld all the time out of order in syndication, and then watching it in order, you're like, there are actually subtle little arcs and in-jokes and references to the callbacks that I didn't even realize Seinfeld was playing with callbacks. As a student of comedy, this just appeals to me. I was like, oh, I didn't realize they were venturing into that functional joke territory that early. And I get the same thing from watching. It's double-edged, man, I gotta say, because my impression, and I like this, I think another way of saying it is we're checking in with the journey so far. Like, yeah, we deep dive into each film very, we like to just get into it, but it's cool to also do, well, now we've seen 5. What's your impression of the overall arc of this person
just
so far?
check in, whatever we want to say.
I will say I'm getting both. I feel like there's a lot more confidence in some aspects, and it might just be this film, filming on water and underwater, very difficult, intentionally set himself a challenge. But I will say, I thought this movie has super high, maybe some of my favorite Wes Anderson craftsmanship moments, and some of the sloppiest, like, wow, I can't believe that made it in moments in terms of craftsmanship. Both. And there's a big swing. And I'm starting to go, on the one hand, respect this person and know them more deeply and what they're interested in. And on the other hand, there is a magic shine that comes off as you do that, because you're like, oh, I see. You like
he's done this before.
You like these 7 things. And I will say, P.T. Anderson is better at obfuscating that so far, meaning he seems very rangy. The movies, you know what I mean? Like, even the tactics he employs vary from film to film.
His themes are vastly different. It's not always the same content.
Whereas Wes, I am getting down to the point where I'm like, okay, so the last shot of every film ramps in from normal to slow motion with a musical sting. Like, do you feel legally obligated to do that? Is that your M. Night Shyamalan twist? Because, like, mix it up a little. You know, I have that feeling sometimes. And then there's other moments where I'm like, wow. And we'll get to those as well.
Just wowie.
Well, I don't want to unpack it all. That's what the rest of the show's for.
So let's get into it. In our first segment, we don't really do a pagination on this.
But
Spectra. Well, you do, but who uses that word? That's an old ass word.
Yeah, let's use normal words. Like this segment's title, diegesis. That's a normal word. Nice,
that's a normal word that
$3 word.
Everyone knows. Yeah, we're just gonna go through the film and punctuate points that were like, hey.
Yeah, but generally a recap with a bunch of stuff attached to it. This is where we get our actual comments on the. But, you know, it's also great for people who haven't seen the film recently, because I think it refreshes what we're going to discuss in the next segment in your mind. So as I said, 2004, a co-write with Noah Baumbach, I believe for the first time, not their first collaboration ever, but their first feature film co-write. And also the only other thing I want to say about the team is incredible score by Mark Mothersbaugh, who is always great. And Devo is one of the best bands. The end.
And Seu Zorja, I think I'm saying that right. Who plays a cast member, Pele dos Santos.
Of course. Mothersbaugh didn't.
I'm sure we'll get into that.
The Portuguese Bowie.
There is Portuguese Bowie throughout, little acoustic covers. I would say is like 50% of the score, which he did himself. Right. Yeah, Seu Jorge is like an actual musician. So, and stellar cast as always. It's Wes Anderson. So we got Bill Murray, Owen Wilson, Cate Blanchett, Angelica Houston, Willem Dafoe, Jeff Goldblum, Michael Gambon. Like, holy shit! You know, holy shit.
I mean, since I've seen The Cook, the Thief, the Wife, and the Lover, I can never think of Michael Gambon again the same. But
yeah.
Changes him somehow.
Yeah,
but he's goofy and friendly in
Dumbledore.
This. Yeah. It opens at the premiere of part 1 of Steve Zissou's new film, Bill Murray, the titular Steve Zissou, which is called Adventure Number 12, The Jaguar Shark Part 1, which is then treated as a framing device. And I got to say immediately, this is one of the moments where I was like, for Royal my money, Wes, you got to stretch a little more. But Royal Tannenbaums and Rushmore. And I don't think Bottle Rocket does, but it's becoming a rut where the screening is basically an excuse to do yet another opening montage with narration that's a big list where you just go, here's this person's deal, here's their deal, here's their deal. And you have little postcards that have cute, funny details, like the script girl is the youngest one and is presented topless in the postcard. They say this person's Pele's the safety supervisor, and it's a shot of him hurling a flare angrily into the river. It's hilarious. But I did, for whatever reason, that bumped me of like, okay, we're doing this again. Okay. And then, but I see why, because it's rich with information, right?
It's because he wants to put you as close to in medias res as possible. And by that, what I mean is that he wants to give you front load so much information so that he's already doing context later, because he finds context way more interesting than exposition. So he does a charming montage to get most of the foundation down. So you can be like, yes, this next scene can therefore be the nuance of how these two people are estranged, as opposed to the scene in a normal screenplay, which would be, here's
slowly
that they're estranged.
Here's their info.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why info dumps are artistically defensible in some way, which is so interesting because
Absolutely.
it is hammered into young screenwriters to not do that. And maybe that's why I'm reacting that way. You know, it's just my like reflexes.
Indoctrinated.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why, because if you just did that and then did nothing interesting with it, it's the least interesting storytelling that exists.
Yes.
Because then it's just and then.
But you could argue Wes has the skill to do that responsibly, I guess, would then be the, yeah.
Yeah, and he charms it up a bit. He charms up the exposition.
He does it well. I especially love Rushmore's. The fake clubs are that's arguably a funny list.
It feels earned in a way, right?
But we get a lot, including the fact that he loves Esteban. Bill Murray loves Esteban because we see him kiss his head and show emotion, which he doesn't for the rest of the film, except in a few key moments. And then I think the other thing that's really important that we get from that is the vibe and the way that he is aesthetically going to tackle the splendor of the undersea world, because that's something, Finding Nemo had to deal with it. And then Ponyo had to deal with it. Like when you're animating the undersea world, that's a very unique challenge to set yourself. Horizon Forbidden West recently it has a lot of this work, but like, this way is a really cool way too. I have to say the way that the Wes look applies to something that's not just the insides of houses. So it's basically, interior design is the way that art deck is usually expressed. The fact that this is fake fish and fake undersea plants and fake, land masses, it reminded me of the Muppets, which is very high praise, meaning like it made me feel weird and comforted and like the way I felt when I was a kid, but a weird homemade brand of vintage fantastical. Yeah. Very specific.
And I think he knows exactly what he's doing there too, because it might just be for some specific generations, but there's a line later where they talk about he'd be 11 and a half, referring to a child that is yet to be born. That's my favorite age. And I think that that's Wes Anderson. And that's also, it comes from storybooks. It comes from, you've developed enough that you're actually responding to some of this childlike fairy tales that you've been reading. And I think that there's something where it's like, okay, identity is starting to stir, and your regurgitation of, the things you've been reading, which have mostly been magical, are most fresh in your mind. I think that there's a magic, kind of eye of the storm there. And I really think a lot of Wes Anderson's visual aesthetic is determined by what he experienced during that time period. I would actually argue he points at it several times in his movies.
Time, for sure.
Yeah. I think,
so we get the inciting incident as well in the film, which is we see in part one of this film that's being screened that Esteban gets killed by some kind of mysterious undersea creature. And, Bill Murray / Zissou surfaces screaming, "Esteban was eaten by a shark-like fish 10 meters." To which Willem Dafoe, who plays Klaus, another stellar cast member I don't think we mentioned yet, "Bitten? Eaten. So swallowed whole? No, chewed." Like they have a little debate about it.
Yeah.
And they accuse him of having the crazy eye, and we get a close shot of him with contacts in, having like little hypnotic
spirals,
crazy eyes. Klaus yells, "Steve, we think you got the crazy eye." And they drag him out of the water. And we cut out to the screening happening at a theater, and we see that Steve Zissou, attending his own premiere, is overwhelmed by some kind of emotion and wanders out and smokes a joint, right? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He burns one.
He burns one down.
But he vows to find the shark and kill it.
Then he fields questions from the audience. Yeah.
In a Q&A for the scientific purpose of revenge, as it's said. What scientific purpose? Yeah. Revenge.
I don't know how yet. Maybe dynamite.
Right. Which just becomes a running joke.
Of course, we noticed, because he was already famous at this point, that the person who asked, "What are your plans for the jaguar shark that you think killed Esteban?" is Owen Wilson, and he's wearing a pilot's uniform. Like, you definitely notice those things, right?
Right. Yeah.
But you don't know who he is yet or what's going on. Then we get a bunch of flat, wide postcard shots at eye level because it's a Wes Anderson movie.
Yep.
Of a party afterwards, and a bunch of people are negging Steve, and we sort of get the washed up, right? He has washed up divorced dad energy or whatever, even though he does have a wife. But I mean, he's got that energy. He's forced to take a photo against his will with Alistair or Ali, his rival, who's Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
And he tells his wife, Eleanor, played by Angelica Houston, trigger warning, homophobia here. Don't be nice to Ali. He's my nemesis. How could you lay that slick F word? And I want to stop down here. Not stop down. That means stop the recording. But I want to pause and talk about, because it's the first time it comes up. He's super homophobic multiple times. And obviously time's passing. I'll just say this. When we did our Rushmore episode, someone in the comments got mad at us, or I'm being oversensitive. I don't want to mischaracterize them, but they mentioned that they're like, this movie, or Rushmore, is just cover for two men toxically harassing and sexually assaulting. And I thought that's valid, but I also think it's still worth, blah, blah, blah. I did the little dance in my head. And this one makes me lean more towards that person's point of view, I gotta say, where I'm like, how did you feel about Steve getting forgiven fairly easily after being a pretty bullshit guy?
I do have a lot of problems.
Like, if you took it seriously, right? Like, he steals and shoots a guy to death and betrays everyone over and over.
He's a son of a bitch all the way
Royal
through.
Tannenbaum is also equally like a shit guy.
I think it's important to separate the comeuppance of it, like the justice for the character, which is the writer saying this is what ought to be. There's like some kind of moralistic tale, or moral to that, and that's where I think we start going, okay, yeah. So what are you trying to say, Wes? I have no problem him calling like Goldblum a queer and just like talking down to him the whole time. Basically, the whole point is Steve Zissou. If he doesn't like you, you are immediately gay. He calls Jane, aka Kate Blanchett, a bull dyke. It's like his go-to response. I'm pretty sure this is actually Wes Anderson focusing on Zissou's weaponization of insecurities, something that he does not allow to happen to himself. He's mainly preoccupied with what people think of him all the time. So like, I think that that's a valid thing for a character to do, but it's true. He gives his characters a pass for being kind of monsters often, like we do in a lot of comedies of this era. It's just
becoming a pattern where the aging central white hetero male figure is a piece of shit, and then at the end goes, I am a piece of shit, and they go, yeah, but it's okay, Dad, or whatever. And they go, thank you. And it's resolved. And you're like, I don't know. It's not that clean in real life, but whatever. So we've said that, and that's fine.
We'll dip into it, I think, in our next segment, just because I think that there's more mining there. But let's move on. But
he is, and I'm not trying to conflate it with Wes. It's not a dragged across concrete situation by a long shot, but I just thought it bore mentioning because it definitely triggered me. So, but it does a great job of setting him up as washed up and shitty, because then someone who's clearly like a mistress or something comes and embarrasses him in front of his wife, and they both storm away from him as he pops a pill with alcohol. And you're like, it's almost like the dude on the toilet, with the bowling ball in the toilet and the milk on his head. It's like a good image of a broken man.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Let's see. I thought this was really interesting because it reminds me of the love on the knuckles in Punch Drunk Love. It's so like literal. Steve sadly reaches out to a video monitor showing footage of Esteban, and the screen shocks his finger like a little shock of electricity.
It reaches back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very on the nose. And I'm not even saying that in a bad way. I mean a magical realism way. Let's see. Defoe's kid is a fan and brings him a crayon pony fish, which is, we start to realize, there's going to be actual made up fish in this movie. It's like a seahorse with rainbow colors. And Defoe points out, you don't seem well. Another old man comes and bugs him for signatures on all his movie posters. And they basically just do a funny little bit where he gets sick of it. And you're getting more info dump because you're like, okay, he's made a sequence of movies, but they're old, blah, blah, blah.
And it's like, and it's clear that what he is a combination of like Jacques Cousteau and Buck Rogers. Like
or
that's
Anchorman as Jacques Cousteau. Yeah.
Yeah. It's beloved by a small niche of people.
He's
and
the bad
they're
boy of
all
oceanography.
very rich. Yeah, they're very rich, and it's kind of a sketch in that way. And he then moves on to accost a fan.
A reporter who's like egging him on. Yeah. I would say more than a fan.
Because they ask, who are you going to kill in part 2?
Yeah, and he
which actually
him.
Comes to pass.
That's true. But it is, that would make me throw
That
hands.
would make me get angry. He just lost his friend, right?
Yeah. And he scrupulously saves the ponyfish. So you're like, okay, but his redeeming value, it's structured very well. I mean, it's all clear. He's an asshole who's washed up. He does love the ocean. Like, right? You're getting the character so much. Mm-hmm. I mean, that it's effective. The Pele plays Ziggy Stardust in Portuguese, which just fucking rules while the sound guy tapes it. Like, what a fucking vibe. And I think a lot of Zissou, even more than Tenenbaums, even more than, because it's on the sea, because they are like a team that's treated almost like a sports team story at some points of the film. Yeah. They all wear matching uniforms. Like, there's many moments of this film where I am like, this is a unique, good vibe that I have never experienced in any other film, including any other Wes Anderson film. This doesn't feel like Bottle Rockets. This doesn't feel like, at moments. So like, and the actor / singer guitarist deserves a lot of credit, because the Bowie stuff in Portuguese adds to that vibe tremendously. It's just a great combo of elements.
Also, check out that artist, Seu Jorge. He's got this track called Carolina, and it fucking rips. It's like better than any of his covers. It's really fun. Anyway, just wanted to, for my Zorge heads out there.
Yeah. All right, so let's see. Just so that we have the entire premise clear in our heads, he says to his old producer and his wife, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go on an all-night drunk, and then in 10 days, I'm going to hunt down the shark that ate my friend and destroy it. And we're like, the movie has begun. Yeah.
We do get one last thing. There's pressure for the next one to be a commercial hit. Yeah. Because he's in a rut. As well. So the man who finances all of his films, who is an off-screen character, Larry Amin, is said that he the financing needs to be really tight this time, because he's not going to give him as much money. So that's where we're going, and this is what our protagonist has vowed.
Then the B plot begins. Yeah. This is, I mean, it is a textbook structure.
Structure-wise, yeah.
Yeah, so B-plot must begin now, and that is introduced by Owen Wilson saying, hey, I'm your long-lost son. Boom. B-plot.
Basically, boom. Ned. Yeah. He's Ned. He's here Ned. Now.
And the pipe that is laid that will be picked up later is Bill Murray says, I never knew you existed, and he accepts that, but we can tell he's suspicious. He goes like, yeah, that's okay. And he goes, so you were supposed to be my son? I don't know, but I wanted to meet you just in case. And they're like, okay, welcome aboard. But it's awkward, right? As I'm sure it would be in real life. So then, in an interesting but sensible twist on Wes's normal postcardy style, we start to get woozy postcards where the camera gently cants back and forth like you're on the sea.
I think this totally is the coolest shit, though.
It's good. It gives
the way
total
we
vibe.
do. So this is a sequence where we show kind of the introduction of the boat. We did the crew now. Yeah. Now we're going to see the boat in motion and like what the boat feels like. And in order to do that, you show the space. And this is something that Wes Anderson has talked about. He's very influenced by French New Wave cinema. So it's coming from a specific era of a set of like I think a like 3 or 4 films that were made in the 60s that were considered dollhouse filmmaking.
Yeah.
And what you think of is like when you open a dollhouse or like saw it in half, that's what you get. It's a very cool set. One of the most elaborate set that Wes Anderson has ever worked in,
Right.
I think to this day, in terms of stage sets
And
that I've seen
I was
in his
going to say, as a
movies.
theater major, I have to just stress that inspired originally by the same fad in set deck for the theater world, be like Arthur Miller and Death of a Salesman was famously staged in the dollhouse style. And then all the Pinter stuff got revived in the dollhouse style. And then filmmakers were like, fucking, I'm going to do that for a movie. And yes, I actually think the Belafonte is up there with these Firefly and shit as like one of the more memorable, or the Serenity, I guess, one of the more memorable ships. If you're just talking ships, like I know the inside and out of it. I think it's really cool and funky, and I love its functionalities. If it were a toy, I would have wanted it as a kid. It has a chopper. They have to crouch
to get through some rooms, but other rooms are very lavish and elaborate and feel like a normal den of like a home. It's got life in it, it's got a contrast, and it feels lived in, and that feels like a world you want to be in. So I understand the cult following of this movie, even though this did get like, it didn't make its money back. It fucking it bombed.
One of his least successful films financially.
It's gotten a lot of people in the years saying this movie's actually pretty good, and I think that this is one of the credits is the artistic stylings of it. It really, you feel how Wes Anderson has developed over time.
It comes with a pair of albino scout dolphins, of which Zissou says they're supposedly very intelligent, although I've never seen any evidence of that.
He fucking hates those dolphins.
He hates the dolphins. We observed that the sub used to be called Jacqueline, and now it's called Deep Search, and Jacqueline's crossed out. And we hear Ned ask him, what happened to Jacqueline? And he says, she didn't really love me. And it fades down to black. It's just a very powerful, interesting visual vignette. It's the let me tell you about my boat vignette. It's awesome. Just watch it on YouTube if you don't care about the rest of the movie. It is really cool. So many talented craftspeople had to come together to make that sequence. Right. Yeah, and Owen joins the voyage. That's basically the end of that.
And then next kind of sequence, Zissou overhears some people in the lobby make fun of him and his earring, which again is a nod to I think he doesn't want to be seen as gay. Also that he hit on a 15-year-old. Did you catch that one this time?
No, this is what I'm saying is it's not just the one homophobic slur. It's the fact that if you break down the details of the thing, he's just a piece of shit. Committed statutory rape and murder and shit. So it's like, or at least aggravated manslaughter. So it's just like, wow, he really goes there. And
that's all fine and good to have your character be that almost irredeemable, and then try to. But then the next thing happens, which is that immediately, almost without. Like with an expected cue, I guess is the phrase I would use. This hurts him, and camera follows and gives us a close up, and that's how we start the scene. Ned and him have a heart to heart, which leads him to kind of say like, they may say this stuff, and they may, you're supposed to think that they're jealous, but this really hurts me, and so there's a lot of sympathy for the devil here.
Yeah, and Ned says, well, my mom killed herself with sleeping pills. Well, he doesn't just say that unprompted, but they're commiserating about hurt feelings. And he says, why would she do that? And he says, well, she was in a great deal of pain, And he goes, oh, yeah, I see. Yeah. I thought that was a really interesting interchange. Just slice of life. Like, yeah, what can be said?
I think that's Baumbach's touch, I think, is that
I was going to say, pattern. I also feel like you can tell, and there's a moment at the end that I'll definitely bring this into focus. You can tell the Baumbach moments if you're a fan of his writing through films like Squid and the Whale and stuff like that.
Marriage Story.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
And you can tell what's Wes for sure in this film. You can feel the chocolate and the peanut butter of it. So
Margot at the wedding.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So he's bonding. They're bonding. So he flies Ned out to it. He says, hey, let's check out my private island. And is sort of trying to impress him. But, he's washed up. So it's like an Archer thing where it's not that impressive. Eleanor immediately greets them and says, your cat died. A rattlesnake bit it in the throat. And he's like, God damn it, why do you have to tell me that way, you rich bitch? And he obviously resents that people call her the brains behind Team Zissou. So we also get the impression that the marriage is strained. And we're like, he's washed up in every dimension, right? It's the career, it's the marriage, it's a shitty deadbeat dad. And yet at the same time, he lives a mystical life full of rich luxury and oceanographic wonder. Like we cut to him feeding an orca a fish from his hand and stuff like that. So Ned is still kind of charmed and impressed, especially when that night he's awoken to hold the boom and record sound for a scene they're filming spontaneously because of what they call a rubber tide, which is a bunch of electric glowing jellyfish who washed on shore. And it's like, so we get the washed upness of it all, but we also but it's punctuated by magical moments. Like you can't beat. There's a reason everyone wants to be at some point in their life a marine biologist, right? Because it's magical. Those moments, you imagine it to be at least.
Yeah. I mean, they punctuated at the end to really drive it home. It's like it's the appeal for the work and the appeal for like, he's got a vision. But his life is a goddamn mess, and it's due to his own insecurities and failings, which will become the theme as we develop.
And our runner plot kicks in, which is defined as I would count that as the love triangle fatherhood B plot like arc. I meant the even less time spent on it arc, which is Willem Dafoe being jealous of. Klaus comes up and is like, he can't even work a boom. He doesn't know diddly jack about what we're doing here.
It's great.
So they just establish that he's jealous so that later he can make up with it.
Yeah. He's not a true crewman.
But you're right. The main plot is moved forward by the arrival of Cate Blanchett as Jane, I guess, but they call her Cubby most of the time. So I think of her as Cubby, but I know her character name is Jane. And she correctly identifies the jellyfish, which Steve misidentified, which is just kind of a good puncturing of, and, setup of their relationship, which is going to be her completely taking the piss out of him and pointing out that he's washed up. And she's pregnant, which I mentioned because it's key to the plot. And then it turns out they forgot to pick her up at the airport and she had to sail there for 4 hours, which is neither here nor there. It's just like they're a shitty operation. They suck. We get it over and over. Klaus, I think it is important that Klaus wants to creepily hit on her, but Steve stops him, but only because he wants to creepily hit on her. He's like, not this one, Klaus.
It's the concept of dibs, which is nonsense. Also, there's, no, just keep going, actually.
All right.
You're on a roll.
We slowly start to dolly down the hall, which I did think was a cool, effective shot, down the depth of the hall as Ned creeps out to investigate a sound, and he finds Jane reading to her unborn child. And he ends up, so we get like dibs, but then we get Ned and Jane having a scene where you go almost Bottle Rocket-esque. Oh, they're obviously the ones that are meant to be together, not Steven. Like this is where the real action is. The two young, attractive people, as you'd expect. So they bond over the fact that, they both are coming from sort of negative situations. He says his mom committed suicide because of the pain from ovarian cancer. And she says she is clearly in a relationship where the father of her unborn child is married to someone else, and she's dealing with that. And he asks if he can stay a while and listen to her read, and she says, okay. And it's a sweet little moment or whatever. Yeah. I do like the ending. All right, well, do you want me to catch you up on the story? Nah, I'll figure it out. Like he's, the point is just to hear her voice, not the story itself. And that is cute. It's cute exactly in the way that Luke Wilson was cute in Bottle Rocket.
It's a mother to a child. It's not.
Yeah. We just covered Punch Drunk Love, which has that vibe as well. So. Yes, we all want to fuck my mother. Hi, Mom. She listens to this. Hey, how you doing, Mom? How you doing, Mom? Steve sits down for his first official interview with Jane, and she immediately launches into hardball questions. And he's like, "Whoa, what's happening here? I thought this was going to be a puff piece."
Yeah, and so he calls her a phony and points a gun at her.
Oh my God. This is where So she says, She says, your film seemed fake. And he says, oh, did it seem fake when my best friend was bit in half and eaten alive screaming right in front of me? I think you're a fake and a phony and a bad reporter. Does this seem fake? And he points a loaded gun at her head.
It's like, kind of amazing.
It's a very Always Sunny, like Archer moment.
There should be no illusion what Wes Anderson's doing here, right? Like he wants you to think
that's bad.
That this guy is a mess.
This guy's a menace.
He's just met a pregnant woman, and his first thing he does is points a gun at her to prove a point.
Yeah.
Because she just asked questions about if he's happy about his career success and his public perception. He fires questions back at her, and she stops the recording, even though she's not the point of the interview. I think it's interesting that she stops the recording because she herself shows that she has insecurities about her reporting, which becomes later. Like this is what Wes Anderson does. He makes like a little insecurity sandwich for us to eat every scene. Yeah.
After that scene, Klaus confronts Ned basically for no reason, just because he wants to stir up shit. Keeps calling him Sonny and eventually slaps him, like sucker slaps him, and says, it's the Zissou show, not the Ned show. To which Ned replies, Klaus, if you ever touch me again, I will kick your goddamn teeth out. Is that understood? And Klaus says, not if I don't see you first, Sonny. Klaus, I got to say, Defoe, which I'm sure is a breakout hit character for people who love this film, really reminded me of J.K. Simmons in Lady Killers. So check out our Lady Killers episode of Coen Brothers for more on how he functions. But copy paste that, like he's that guy, functionally. Steve coaches Ned on how to handle the reporter. It's clear that Steve's trying to spin the story. So like he's constantly wheedling Jane to make him look good. And he's telling Ned, all right, if the reporter asks you this, tell her this, or, like, don't fuck me over on this.
But Ned cuts to the chase and asks if he knew that he was possibly his son, why did he never reach out? And Zissou responds that he hates fathers and he never wanted to be one. And so that's our kind of true starting beat. Like this is the first layer of the onion. And it's not that dense of an onion.
No, it's just his dad was shitty. This is just where he fears fatherhood. That is all it ever is, which I think
that's all it ever is.
That's a believable, grounded.
That's all it needs to be.
Simple, functional.
It's just a little bit of introspection and a little bit of grief. And then at 34 minutes out of it's 110 or so minutes, Murray gets a call from Gambon saying that their financier has basically pulled funding. And I love the phone call. It's very good. He's like, so Michael Gambon is like, let's not cast stones at each other, my boy. Do you hear me, damn it? Do you? Like he just changes for no reason. And then Bill Murray gives one of the most Bill Murray readings of line. He goes, no, I don't. And he's just, they're immediately at 11. And it's just, they're both angry. It's a wonderful little, it's over in like 10 seconds. It's great.
They'll do Clooney and Murray will do that in the Fantastic Mr. Fox, almost that exact same bit. And it always works where you go from 0 to 100. Fuck you, cuss. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of talks to the toxic masculinity that he's kind of deconstructing here. And then it's immediately fizzled away because Ned says he inherited $275,000 because
and he's willing to give it to the movie. To the production.
Would that work?
Yeah.
Would that make any difference? And of course it would. So
they fly by chopper straight to Gambon to spend the money immediately and like get the bank going and lock him down.
Yeah.
But the bank has a few requirements because they're loaning them like matching funds. $275 isn't the full production budget. So in order to secure the entire loan package, they have to do piss tests. So they can't be high the whole time.
A drug test.
And they have to bring along a stooge from the Bond company, which they repeatedly call him. And his name is Bill Ubell, played by Bud Gort.
Bud Gort, yeah.
Of Arrested Development.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Why not? That's what I love him in. And they have to swear not to kill the shark. Not to kill the whole thing that they're getting revenge for. And he agrees tentatively. He says, I'll fight it, but I'll let it live. What about my dynamite? And I love the Gambon just goes, Philip, the dynamite. Like, that's
dynamite.
fine. Yeah,
Like there's no pretense whatsoever, even though it's clearly what's going on is he's not going to listen.
Then we get maybe one of the only cartography montages in film. We get a jaunty montage of them like navigating the sea, which is amazing.
They're doing but they're also setting up. They're doing cardio, dynamite tests. Ned gives a seashell to Jane, so we're developing all arcs.
The triangle is forming. Yeah.
And Zissou, of course, interrupts. Ned learns to swim. He dies for a second, and that takes us out of the montage. They revive, but not before they make sure that the camera was exposed correctly, like with the lighting.
The other recurring joke is that times when you'd think things are so out of control that they wouldn't be filming, they're always filming. That is a recurring bit. Yeah.
Which is now like in a post, we're now postmodern when it comes to like The Office, and our culture has, things like influencers that has lost its teeth. I remember,
and we have shows that are shot in The Office style where they don't even explain diegetically why it's like there is no fictional documentary crew,
which I just think is interesting. Because when you look at this era, like, even 15 years ago, it was like,
isn't it weird that
this
they're
is
filming
fresh.
This? Yeah.
It's funny. Let's do a joke about how like the cameraman's going to die. The new season of What We Do in the Shadows just came out, and I was watching the first episode last night, and they literally do that on, and I had the same thought. I was like, they're still doing that bit. Because that bit was popular, like one of the best parts of the jokes of the original movie. But it's been 10 years.
Now everyone films everything all the time. It's weird that it wouldn't be filmed. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, we get it. Yeah. The cameraman's there. Everyone's has to be in the room. That's yep.
So then we get a thing that bumped me in terms of, I don't know, my note is just pretty sweaty metaphor, bro, which is to represent that the marriage is falling apart. Eleanor confronts Steve and says, I don't think you should have taken Ned's money. And he goes, come on. He's an investor. He's my sidekick. And she points out, the sugar crabs are back.
The sugar crabs.
They look down at some fanciful CG crabs. And he says, they're early this year. I've never seen them mating before the solstice. And he says, is that mating? And then it cuts to them brutally ripping each other apart. Get it? That's them. That's their marriage.
The nature of the relationship.
Okay, all right.
But some great work with the what's it called? The seahorse in this. We're starting to see Henry Selick, who's
really cool.
All of the animation. You can see the Nightmare Before Christmas of it all.
For sure.
It's cool.
And then to
at sea
not be seen as a Wes shitter upon her. Well, and because it's true. Then we get a wonderful shot of Bill Murray walking upset back and forth down this dock that's swaying in the breeze, lit by overhead lamps, as his wife flies away because she doesn't want to be part of the production, and he's unsure about the state of his marriage. Really beautiful shot, I thought.
Very, very much so. Yeah. That is there's it's interesting because usually the aesthetic of, like, think about Bottle Rocket and how little control there was there, and how the aesthetic really started to come into its own during Rushmore. Wes Anderson functions greatly with control, just like any director, but he chooses as part of that control rooms that I can shoot a pretty wall. It's great to see him go outside and look at the sea and be like, that is pretty as well, which we see in his later films like Moonrise. He's getting more confident with less control, finding a way to find good shots instead of shots that are usually on the rails of a Wes Anderson thing. Our next sequence, we're at sea while they cut the film. Jane and Zissou do an interview in a hot air balloon. Well, it's not as much of an interview as it feels like a date. Zissou shows off the tattoo that is identical to the submarine that Michael pointed out last. The word Jacqueline crossed out and replaced with Deep Search, showing that he even denies that she exists on his body. Like, it's not that he crossed off her name as much as he crossed off the name of his submarine, and shows that he's closed to that kind of pain. And she confides into him that she had a poster of him above her aquarium when she was growing up.
Which makes him think he can get into her pants.
Yeah. And so he responds that he feels like he's an imposter. And then he makes a pass at her, which she like
rebuffs,
deflects. Yeah. And she asks
and says,
about
why
Ned,
did you abandon Ned? And you're
to
like,
change the subject,
boner killer.
which shows you exactly what is in her mind, and also,
we know
shows what's
mind.
going on.
Yeah.
And drinks his drink, which he responds to. What's the line? Did you have it written down?
Well,
it's something. Do you think you should be drinking when you got a bun in the oven or whatever? So he's like fast to just.
Then he immediately
judgment.
lights a cigarette, by the way, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And also, I think we should mention that he says he floats the idea to Ned that he should change his name to Kingsley, and Ned says no. And then in the documentary materials, they've renamed him Kingsley Ned Zissou, so he unilaterally changes Owen's name. And they actually, despite the triangle that's forming between them, that there's going to be trouble down the line, he is also developing the father-son bond with Ned. It's working out like they're buddy. They wear matching outfits. He's on the team now. And in the editing bay, we see Steve argue that they should make Ned an arc. Like, oh, maybe we should bring into the film the idea that we have a new team member, Ned. And, so he's sort of legitimizing, and as Ned at this point in the film wants and is pleased by, legitimizing his role in his life and saying, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to be pals.
And we get that scene a few, pretty quick here. Ned entrenches himself further into the group by asking to make changes to the Zissou insignia. And Steve says yes. And then there's a reading of a letter, another trademark.
Pretty much
of Wes
standard
Anderson.
boilerplate, I guess.
Boilerplate response to a child Ned who sent fan mail. Save one line, which says, "I remember your mother." So again,
dictated, not read.
Dictated, not read. His past is wrought with the denial of Ned. So we're developing that. Also, there's a short sequence before that just to show off that the dolphins have cameras. It's a planned payoff that pays off later.
Well,
it also has a good,
and they say either they can't hear us or they don't understand. And he says, "I'm so sick of these goddamn dolphins.
Son of a bitch. I'm sick of these dolphins." Yeah. Zissou decides to take a shortcut through unprotected waters next. Even though his intern protests, in order to cut down time.
Well, in order to break into a research station owned by Ari Hennessy, the Goldblum rival, to strip it of the equipment they will need to track down the jaguar shark they're trying to get revenge on. So they don't even have enough money to really make the voyage work, so they have to steal stuff as well. Plus, it's out of spite because he hates him. It really, it is a classy version of Archer. I keep thinking of Archer.
It's very Archer. Yeah.
Long episode of Archer.
Because they're fools and they're
thieves,
overconfident.
And they're on, shooting at each other a lot and having adventures. Yeah.
There's a quick scene where Zissou confides in Ned that he actually likes Jane as well. Even though it seems like so far they have hated each other, he's like, nah, I kind of like that. And Ned kind of accepts this. And then we cut to immediately the result of that, which is Zissou breaks into Jane's room and reads her notes on him, and he's offended, and she's offended because he broke into her room.
Right.
And he says, "Please don't make fun of me. I just wanted to flirt with you," which is the most Wes Anderson line I can ever think of.
Baby.
Yeah, exactly right. Pathetic and thirsty.
Yeah. And I want to point out, I think a thought that coalesced that I think is valid is, I have no problem with any individual. I do like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia in a vacuum. I like this in a vacuum. I like The Office, even though Michael is indefensible and we still are made to forgive. I like forgiveness, especially when the character is shown to have actually learned and altered their behaviors. And then the forgiveness feels real and earned and redeemed and whatever. But I'll just say, then when other people reflect back to me, yes, but if you look at the landscape in every movie is about, it's so interesting how white cis men can be toxic deep inside, but we could still forgive them. You're like, if 80% of movies about that, then you have a problem, and it's like a societal pattern problem. But I just want to state that in each individual case, I do think I totally stand behind that it's hilarious that he points a gun at a pregnant lady. It's context. Yeah.
It's context. It's also like, I mean, I don't know. We've also thought about it a lot more. We just wrote a movie about forgiving a cis, teenager for being a bigot. And it's like, we do that less. I don't know. It doesn't need to be a conversation about this, but it's just like, I don't know. After thinking about it for a while, you start to realize, man, we normalize this shit all the time.
We're sure interested in ourselves. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And
And we'll talk about this more, I think, when we get to Phantom Thread and There Will Be Blood, and because PTA is not without his area
as these guys get older, they
settle into
both
a groove.
Do seem to double down on this fact. So.
Mm-hmm. But back to the movie, Hennessy Goldblum finds out that the lab was broken into and vows to hunt them down for revenge. So it's a revenge
I love
thing.
that Goldblum does the same exact thing. He just is like they both do sea excursions. They both have like
they're the same guy.
They're the same guy. They just one has a little bit more money. Recently rewatched Twister, and it's like the same thing with Cary Elwes and Bill Paxton / Helen Hunt. It's like, we're the ragtag crew and you're the ones who have all the money.
Cobra Kai.
You're both doing weird shit. You're both going out in the middle of nowhere and recording shit for science, but you're really just there to like basically have a pissing contest. I don't know. It's just it'll never not be funny to me.
Agreed. So then, we cut around a lot in this movie, just boom, and now a new thing's happening. And so indeed that happens, and we're getting direct-to-camera footage from the doc of Steve bragging about the antennas in their hats that let them listen to cool synth music while they dive. We hear a kick-ass Mark Mothersbaugh theme that I'm sure you all associate with the movie. And Bill Murray does an awkward, hilarious dance that is incredible in its subtle hilarity. And was in the trailer, and I'm sure everyone can remember his little dance. Then they dive, and they find a crashed plane, a black box. This part reminded me of Subnautica, the game, if you played that. And they start talking underwater because they have the cool helmets. And Ned says, "Would it be all right for me to address you as Dad in this scene?" To which Bill Murray replies, "No. Why?" Which is such a good, funny. I feel like that's a Baumbach.
Because you're my father?
Yeah. And he says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. I'm sorry." And Klaus says, "Where are you coming from, you jack off? Shit." But then he says, "No, that was a good impulse. Let's use a nickname. You can call me Steve Z." So there's just this awkward interplay of he wants to be a father figure. He doesn't want to be a father figure. Ned wants him to be his father. Ned doesn't want him to be his father.
Yeah, it's this. It's in flux. He's trying to have a relationship, which we'll talk about a little bit more because I definitely want to dive into what Steve Zissou thinks, what he's thinking actually, because there's some reveals to happen soon, like what he actually thinks about, like why is he doing this,
Yeah.
But that ends and we get the next scene, which is just a Klaus rules scene. Ned slaps him to get even, just unprompted. But Klaus is like, I thought it was all wrapped up. He thought that they were like, okay, they were cool. But like Ned was like, no, I owed you one. I owed you a slap. And Klaus, it's so funny because he's all bark no bite. We learn in this scene, he fights for himself just a little bit, but then he cries and runs away. Well, even, damn it. Like he's just a little, it's just so cute. I just love Klaus so much.
He's pretty great. Then Ned listens to the baby in Jane's tummy while she chews gum and drinks wine. It's a very Wes Anderson combination of elements. And he says, I think you'll be a very good single mother, although it does put you both at a tremendous disadvantage. And then they bone or they start
Would it surprise you that the first casting was supposed to be Gwyneth Paltrow?
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah. That makes sense. So let's see. Okay. Then comes, and we're essentially at the midpoint of the film, a moment that I do think is a truly genius. This is one of where I was like, this sings so hard. And it's, so he says, I think Steve has a thing for you. He told me you hurt his feelings. And she says, that's so effed up, because her special thing is she says effed up instead of fucked up. And then a the dolphins have cameras on them, right? So we've already set this up. And out the porthole, we can see that a dolphin is filming them boning. Then we see Steve see through a porthole in a door a TV feed on which is projected the footage of them boning. Yeah. But while he's watching, the dolphin looks away to look at another dolphin who nods as if to say, yeah, they're boning. Yeah. And that to me perverts. Is like one of the funniest. It's so complex that it's of a way to walk in on people boning and you feel betrayed.
You're like, I'm watching these dolphins.
A dolphin on camera nodding at you like, that's right, motherfucker. It's such a funny way to do that.
Yeah, it's very funny. So also, good. Pervert dolphins. Perverts. Yeah. Very funny.
A dolphin spying on your son betraying.
And I don't know how we get that because it's not like they have expressions that are like
no, but that dolphin looks like shit.
Oh yeah, motherfucker. And that's something that Wes Anderson I think was intentional, and I think he succeeded. He made those dolphins out to be perverts. So
yeah, and I also thought it was really interesting that it's all in silence and it's all through shots of a round porthole or a round dot, which before, so I'll just say I wrote in my notes before the transition, this really reminds me of the sequence where Hal sees them reading lips in 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is also the midpoint of that film. And this is the midpoint of this film. And that's nuts because the very next moment in this film is Pele singing the song Space Oddity in Portuguese, which is a reference to 2001: A Space Odyssey. So it just made me wonder if it's intentional. If that was like an homage to the Hal sequence.
I didn't think about the David Bowie angle. But yeah, so he's playing the guitar and another good shot. We see in the background that the pirates
they're
are
boarded
arriving
by pirates. Yeah.
So as they're in unprotected waters and the intern was right, they shouldn't go there.
The script
pirates take over the ship and they do it with aplomb because Ned was supposed to be the lookout, but he was boning. Which is something that Steve makes a big deal of. Bill, the stooge, is also taken hostage, and there's a little bit of argument about who they're going to take. But it ends up that it's Bill because he knows Tagalog. And then Zissou goes nuts, and it's suddenly an action movie. In a style that I would say approaches like Sabotage, the Spike Jonze joint, because it's just like a 70s kind of like Knight Rider-esque servo zoom lenses. Like we're doing all this work just to make it all style, and it's completely out of style of Wes Anderson, but it fits for its own sequence because we've seen it all before. And ultimately what happens is he kicks the pirates off the ship. The pirates were basically leaving because they had all the stuff, but
they took their vault. Yeah.
But it's important to Steve that everything happens on his terms. So basically he just killed some people, and an intern points out that he's a maniac, rightfully so.
And one of the interns gets macheted in the shoulder.
One of them gets macheted, which is the intern that actually stays behind.
Right.
Because the next scene is kind of like literal line in the sand. Who's with me? Who wants to keep doing this journey? Who's out? And
they get a dog.
And they get a 3-legged dog left over.
You left your dog, you idiots.
Klaus defends him though, because he's, Klaus will follow him into hell. And there's a wonderful shot of while the interns are kind of discussing the mutiny, there's a wonderful shot of him returning to the porthole and eyeing their descent. So I like that bit. Again, I love Klaus. And that's kind of the pirates sequence. They no longer have their money because the safe was stolen. So Ned's inheritance is gone. A lot of their equipment is gone. They're discouraged. And at their lowest point, Goldblum arrives and he's charging Zissou to save him and his crew. Basically, he's like, I'm looking for the people who stole my shit. And Zissou's like, yeah, it was probably the same. Bad. Yeah. Then he was like, it's probably the pirates. Yeah. I feel like Wes Anderson is telling us something here about Goldblum's character by hitting a dog, a 3-legged dog. And then the interns officially quit. Jane calls the father of her child because we had a small mini arc that while she was under threat of violence, she had the epiphany that she needs to find a father for her child.
Which I boo. I don't know. I think that's a dumb message.
Yeah, it's like, I guess I understand the thought that it's like, in the moment when you're like, like my life isn't in order and here's like the universe telling me get yourself, like have a life. But it does feel like we don't follow Jane enough to really get the nuance of that understanding. So it does feel unearned. And yeah, so she calls the father of her child saying she's not coming back and it's over because she doesn't know what she wants quite yet, but she knows she doesn't want to return. But she's also leaving the expedition and it's too dangerous. So you get the kind of added conflict of, oh, I thought the triangle was going to resolve. Maybe she's just going to leave. Mm-hmm. And that's temporarily where we're set. Back at home, Zissou returns. Good line,
by the way. Ned says, I don't know. I almost feel like my heart's kind of getting broken. I guess I'm overreacting. I like that.
Yeah.
That's Baumbach-y.
That's Baumbach-y right there. Back at home because like he needs a breather, and by home I mean Eleanor's Island, formerly known as Zissou Island, I believe.
All right. Also, you skipped. Sorry, he calls Gambone for help, and he's no help because he's getting deported. Like he can't even. Right. He doesn't have his shit together, and he goes, "Well, what am I supposed to do here?" And he goes, "Well, I must say, nothing's coming to mind. Philip, any suggestions?" No, Philip's shaking his head.
Yeah.
I have nothing for you, bro.
Philip the Dynamite. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then there's this interaction, calls Goldblum a queer. Basically, yeah, all the things that we talked about.
He's an uncouth man.
He's an uncouth man, but he tells her, more importantly, that he's worried that Ned is his son. But he does apologize, and it's the first time we've gotten Steve to. Now we're starting our Act 3 here. He's apologizing for being
trying to make right.
He's trying to make right. So we're starting that transition to Act 3 where I haven't been my best this last decade. He feels his career is over. But not before he calls Angelica Houston too old. So he's still there, still rude, baby.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
He says you were already too old to have a baby, unless that's a cop out. And she goes, I was 34, which is very similar to that's a trick question. You don't have a middle name. It's Margaret. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So it basically he's starting to cope with some of the mechanisms that have formed his insecurities over the years.
But he's got to face the greatest one, which is that he's still
not
jealous
ready.
Of Ned. Yeah.
So he blasts into Jane's room and says a line that I enjoy. Oh, yeah. I'm about to blow my stack.
I turn my back and the bullshit begins. I like that too.
Yeah. So Jane is
and he's basically saying bro code, bro. I called dibs, which is obviously not the right
nonsense
viewpoint. Yeah.
So Ned and Jane are just like they're just sleeping, and Zissou's angry that they're together at all. That's basically all this is, a big baby tantrum.
And he lashes out by calling her a pregnant slut, which of course makes Ned go, okay, that's it. We're gonna fight Steve.
Now. Yeah.
Which is, man, bottle rocket, side of the road, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, you call yourself my son, but I just don't see it. It's nothing personal. They trade punches and argue about, how to properly sucker punch someone. So it's a very twee like fight breakup moment. And then he says to Cubby walks up and Steve says, what do you want? She says nothing. And he says, that's so arrogant. Screw off. Right. And they all start to argue. I let you call me Steve Z. It sounds even better than Dad. To which he responds that that doesn't mean the same thing, which is, of course, very impactful.
And true.
And then finally reveals, a week before my mother killed herself, she told me you knew about me since the day I was born. Is that a fact? That's a fact. And then you're like, okay, then. But seeming to save them from their all is lost moment, or at least like kick the can down the road energy wise, Eleanor arrives by water taxi with all the money they need to save the production. She finally did cave and ask her parents for the money.
They're saved by rich people.
But it turns out the money's not intended for the production. It's intended to recover Bill. So
it's a rescue.
They didn't forget about the company stooge.
And they have a recording of Bill, who is such a stooge that he didn't even tell them where he was because he spent all his time being polite and apologizing.
But Eleanor deduces it.
She can decode his sounds just with magical nonsense. They know where he's going to be. He has to be on these islands. And that's when Steve is like, I know the place because it has to be like this hotel that I've been at. So we cut to them storming the beach, basically. And there's a funny bit.
You skipped just a little scene that I think is notable because of the intense Bechdel fail, which is a scene where Eleanor and Jane have sandwiches and talk. And the first line is the father out of the picture? And the third line is, I don't know, maybe it's my hormones. That makes sense. And all they talk about is, what's going on with the dudes? What do you think about the dudes? How are the dudes working out together? But yeah, so then we get the storming the beach.
Yeah, there's a funny bit with swamp leeches. They only get it on Zissou.
I'm the only one that got hit? What's the deal?
Klaus is sad because he's not picked by Zissou to be on his team when they're separating into A and B teams. But Steve reminds him that he's the leader. He's squad leader of the B team. And this seems to abet that little arc that's happening, which is Klaus is sad because he's also a son. To Zissou. So it's like this kind of like, oh yeah, by the way, we have this little vignette that's going on the whole time, which is exact duplicate of the real one, which is Ned.
Kind of felt like too easy of a resolve for me, or like they ran out of time in the script.
Also not enough difference. But agreed. That's all taste. Turns out the location, because they start going to the hotel, checking each room by room.
Seemingly empty.
Yeah, it's seemingly empty.
He says, all right, let's check out. And then falls down the stairs and says, did you get that, Vikram? Good. We'll show them the reality this time. An old, broken, washed up old man feeling sorry for himself, all washed up. So this is the true all is lost point, because Steve is at this point so disappointed in himself, which he has been the whole time. Yeah. He's willing to show the record to other people his sadness, which he wouldn't before because he's a monolithic kind of figure to a lot of people. Another resonant line earlier that we skipped is, but he says, Ned says, you just wanted me to be in your film. And he goes, but it's not a film, it's a documentary. This is all really happening. So it's been set up that that's what he cares about the most, right? He actually thinks that's my legacy. That's what I really am. I'm the avatar of Jacques Cousteau. And this is him saying, you know what? Put it in the movie. Put it in the movie that I suck. So
that's right. Yeah. And then, we get next scene pitches to Ned that his nickname shouldn't be Stevesy or Dad, because neither feel right. Once again, not the true thing, but we're getting closer. He says, what if you called me Papa Steve? And he apologizes to him. He says, and he calls him his son, which Ned accepts. Just then, like clockwork, because it's writing, as soon as that happens, it turns out they're at the right location. In other words, the second that
because they find a mass grave,
relents,
which is crazy grim.
Yeah. They're
like, Cody, the pirates killed the entire crew.
Yeah, they hang their little hats, their little Goldblum hats on the crosses. Cody, the pirate dog, who would obviously know exactly where they are, points out where the pirates are. Goldblum is playing cards with the pirates, and he asks, "Oh, have you come to save me?" But just then, realizing what's going on, the pirates shoot Goldblum. He's not dead, but they shot in the stomach. And Zissou opens fire at the pirates, much like the previous sequence with the pirates. It's basically an action sequence, but this time we don't show the action movie, probably because of budget. We wait outside with the crew, but we do see explosions and whatnot. It's a whole production.
And we briefly stop for Steve to almost harpoon a child in the face.
Almost.
Which is also pretty grim if you think about it.
Yeah, it's pretty grim. But then, Bill...
He's ready to do that.
Who they actually were here to save. Bill is like, don't do... He was the one who's nice to me. And so he doesn't. And so he saves Bill and Alistair, and he promotes Klaus to A Squad.
He says, that's it, I'm retired.
Yeah, and as they run back to their ship, he barks orders to the Day A team, which he's now off of. Because
Klaus is A team now.
Yeah, because I guess that's relenting a little bit of ego.
Yeah.
I mean, not that much if you're still barking orders, because he still says, yeah, just blow up the pirate ship, which they do. So as they run away, in their ship, the pirates cannot chase after. I did like the joke here about seeing the dog on the shore of, oh no, we forgot Cody. We got to go back.
And no one cares because it was the pirate's dog anyway. Yeah.
Goodbye, Cody.
Goodbye, Cody. Yeah.
They look at Ned's insignia when they return. And now as a team, having, been, forged in the same fire, they all like it. And that we get a little bit of peace here. Zissou is adamant about giving up and selling the sub, but Ned says no, and he gives a little pet talk about finding the shark is one last hurrah. Show him what you're made of, which, Steve is like, okay. Turns out Steve kept Ned's letter that Ned sent as a boy, and they share a loving moment over agreeing that it would be nice to breathe underwater while they fly on a helicopter. But then suddenly their helicopter, a pin in the rotator snaps and they go down.
Which also involves a pretty phenomenal shot that I think is just worth mentioning because it's such a confluence of everything that we're doing here, because it's super twee. Like a very popular indie shot is a shot facing down of feet with cool shoes on, ideally. And true. This is a shot facing down of cool shoes, but in a helicopter that's crashing. And it involves going from not underwater to underwater, which is a huge Anderson, both of them, trope. So I just wanted to call out that shot. It is cool where you see it from like Owen's point of view as he looks down and the thing hits the water. And
I think it's okay.
Go ahead.
I think it's nice as they fall. Steve puts his arm around Ned like a parent does in a car. Yeah.
But then we quickly realize that Ned is badly injured and like blood
in a
is
shot that
pluming from the
I
water.
want to talk about because I think that this is probably Wes Anderson at his. It's him out of his comfort zone, doing a thing that a lot of directors do, which is very good, that he is yet to do, which is to do visual storytelling. While we chronicle, while we do the Andersons, something that I've been adamant about is that something that like Paul Thomas Anderson does, which is that shots that have intention that actually mean something because of the way in which they're shot. Wes Anderson has an aesthetic, and there's kind of like there's like a joke that occurs by the mere fact that it's like presented in the way that it's presented, but the shots are always proscenium and done in the same way, and you don't really have a lot of room to like therefore have some reveal happen in a shot or have a compound shot that moves over and shows but this is actually what occurred. So you don't have any of these compound moments. Suddenly we get one of the first ones I think in his career, honestly, that I can remember, where the blood under the water starts to get a deeper red. And as the waves like kind of lap upon the camera lens, we slowly realize, in combination with Owen Wilson's performance, that he's like clearly kind of dazed and losing blood, that he's probably going to die. Like something is terrifying under the water because it is getting so bloody that literally, I wonder if they got it practically or they actually did it CG. A streak of blood actually falls down the lens because it's so pervasive, the blood. Turns out, he dies.
Cut to funeral, which I do think it totally makes sense structurally because this is a classic. It's funny. There's the 3-act structure with the happy ending. And then this is also a slightly lesser used, but still very popular structure. That's the 3-act structure with the happy ending with an extra sad thing at the end to remind us that life is poignant. This is also a popular film structure for films that want to kind of be taken seriously, but still have fun. And I think so it makes sense in a structural way. I still found it like an odd. I was like, we were so close to, why couldn't it just be happy? It's interesting to me. It's just a taste thing, but yeah.
Do you think choosing to kill Ned here, is that avoiding the, like kind of what you're saying, the cliche arc of passing the, like, so something these films often do, and usually when like a son dies, it's like, there's a cliche kind of thing that we do in movies or in storytelling where you pass the torch to the next generation, right? And so is this maneuver avoiding that cliche, or is it simply just affirming that the story is about Zissou and Zissou only? Like, does it, like, what do you think that his death, why is that included? Why does he need to die?
That's what I I'm saying I envision a version of this film where he doesn't die, and it does seem more cliche, and it doesn't bother me at all. I think I would prefer the version where this movie is about 20 minutes shorter, and Ned is there when they find the jaguar shark, and it still has the same emotional twist, which is they choose not to kill the jaguar shark. But I don't see why Ned has to die. I have the same problem with 6 Feet Under. Sometimes I feel like main characters are taken out because a story wants to feel important. But my argument would be, okay, if you're No Country for Old Men, that makes sense because your entire theme is nihilism or trying to deconstruct the idea that there is comeuppance or justice in the karmic sense. This was not that. This was a treatise on, responsibility, father, son, toxic masculinity, redeeming itself. And mainly
this makes it suffer.
An excuse for oceanographic, funny fun with a guy who's irresponsible like Archer or Anchorman. I think Ned's death is kind of at odds with that and just thrown in as a way to be like, but life is still very serious. And you're like, yeah, I know, but it doesn't feel as in peace with this film to me.
Yeah, it's not. One thing that I did read about it, because I wanted to see if anyone had any answers to it. One thing I read that of note is that the movie is dedicated to Jacques Cousteau, whose son died in a seaplane crash. So it could just be like a 1-to-1 analog. But I don't think that that's not why you narratively, that you can throw a reference into a movie of someone dying on a seaplane crash. That doesn't mean.
I mean, it can also.
That needs to be a major set piece of your plot, like beats.
It can
be. I agree with you.
Sorry, I was just gonna say it could be an attempt to make you feel like it's precious what they found. It's even more precious because they found it just in time.
That's what I was trying to think about that. But like, here's the thing: is it's less true to the complexity of what it means to be a father to me because
sustained responsibility.
They took it away from us. The idea that like, yeah, it's sustained, that he would actually get that. The expeditions would continue, and they could be a father. Yeah. They'd be a father, and we'd see what a father looks like, a true picture of what Zissou as a father would look like. But like, I don't know. And obviously he's in turmoil for the rest of the film about having that ripped from him. But I think it's really like what it comes down to is when it's like a Wes Anderson joint, it's about one person, and it's that person on the top of the pyramid. It's not about poor dead Ned. It could have been, probably should have been, but that's like, I don't know, if I made or you made the movie. So this whole presumption to change the story is not really useful, critical. It's just like my opinion, man.
Right. And of course, anyone can always say, well, in life, stuff happens just randomly, and fine.
Serendipitously fine.
But we're discussing,
but it's convenient because it forces the movie to be about self-examination and not something like, I don't know, Spielberg and the many imitations thereafter, where it's like, his son is also starting his own journey. We just don't get that. It's just that the fatherhood arc just suffers. It just leaves us with his life is over.
Well, I'll tell you the truth is I really think that it might be that the excuse for it was that they reverse engineered it from an image, because as much as there's 3 moments in this film that I think are truly genius. One is the one I already mentioned about the dolphin on film going, yeah. Here comes the second one, and it's Eleanor. It's this image. It's Eleanor smoking a cigarette in a one-man sub, looking at us out a porthole as she watches Ned's coffin sink past her. Mm-hmm. And we get the very first glimpse we've had of the logo for Steve Zissou's team that he designed. And it like falls in slow-mo. It is a truly hypnotic image with a vibe that is unique. It's like Lynchian in its evocativeness in a totally different direction. And I feel very strongly in my bones that Wes Anderson, that's so Wes Anderson-y in a great way. That's what is his genius. Who else could think of that image? Oh, I think in the movie there should be a woman smoking a cigarette in a submarine as a coffin slowly falls past her, draped in a flag that the deceased designed. And you're like, how did you know that would be so emotionally impactful and cool? But that is an amazing, brilliant, genius like feat of imagination. But then to make it work, someone's got to die and be in the coffin. And like, I think it was reversed from that shot. I really do.
again, it's aesthetic first, I guess.
But it's truly phenomenal aesthetic.
It's funny because I was going to also punctuate that moment, and I had a note, and your note was I like yours. It's definitely more, it inspects like what's going on. My note on that shot was, what is this? Death Cab for Cutie? Which is not
it's
anything.
A big, strong lean in a clear direction, and I like things that do that.
That's true. That's for sure. That's for sure. All right, back on the bus.
He makes up with Hennessy basically very easily and for no reason. They're just like, you're all right. Mm-hmm. You're all right.
And we're both bad husbands.
We're both bad husbands. That's what they agree. Yeah. And we get the impression that Steve's relationship with Eleanor is on the mend. He asks if they can posthumously adopt Ned, even though he was 30. She says she'll consider it. Yeah. They have a little chat with Michael Gambon, a little chat with Jane. It's like a wrap-up tour. It really is.
Yeah. Tells Jane you're a good writer and
write whatever you want
was true about him.
I did those things. I said those things.
I can live with that.
I can live with that. Yeah.
And then they find the jaguar shark, or at least the tracking beacon is now on their radar. So the whole team goes into the sub and gets this kind of celebration. They have this dive. They're going to finish the expedition.
We see a bunch of amazing undersea stuff.
Henry Selick's creepy animation shines. We meet the shark.
It's a visual crescendo of the effects. Yeah, we see more fish than we've seen so far. And they see the shark, and it's beautiful, and they don't kill it.
Zissou is vindicated. He did see it, even though he didn't believe in himself, which is kind of the crux of the movie.
He forgives it, which is important because he thought it was unforgivable, and he wants forgiveness even though he's unforgivable, right? We get this.
It's a small win, but it's beautiful, which is actually said by
And it really is
Houston.
Beautiful. I'm not trying to give it short shrift.
Yeah, it's got the Sigur Rós song on it, and that's how we're supposed to feel. And Zissou says, "I wonder if it remembers me," which I was like, I don't know why. I don't know why that's the line.
See,
but anyway.
I actually think so. My third beautiful moment is this moment, which is the expected one, meaning, well, you better nail the emotional crescendo. Yeah. And I'm saying, and I do think they do. So that's my third moment from this film that I'd nominate as truly genius. And it does feel, it's interesting because I feel like that coffin flag moment is all Wes. And I feel like the other moment I liked is, and this one is more Murray, Baumbach, and Wes confluence. Like, I think it kind of is owed to a lot of the people involved. But yes, Murray definitely gets it for crying when he's been so chill and so Bill Murray throughout the whole film. I questioned whether he could cry as an actor, and especially because Lost in Translation had just come out, which is also very low key. Mm-hmm. And he was like, no, I can cry, motherfucker. And that's when they deliver these. And I do think it's a beautiful, right? It's, we forgive the damage that life does to us because life is also beautiful. And that's all wrapped up in the shark. The shark killed Esteban, but it's beautiful. So you forgive it. Yeah.
It's the answer to why forgive.
Why forgive?
You don't have to forgive. You don't have to forgive anyone. No one deserves forgiveness.
Life is already so hard. It's rarely the right call to like obsess and get revenge. It's usually better for you to forgive. And then this is a great encapsulation of that.
The appeal.
It really works.
The appeal to that. Yeah,
I actually think
a very good moment.
The lines where it sings are the lines before when she says, "Are we safe in here?"
I agree.
I doubt it. Do you still want to blow him up? No, we're out of dynamite anyway. Because to me, that's like, are we safe in here? Is life safe? No, I doubt it.
No,
but
I agree.
Okay, does that make you angry? Do you want to blow something up? No, I don't. We're out of dynamite anyway. As if to say, I've lost my juice.
It didn't matter.
I've lost my lust for revenge. Yeah.
Right.
It's a good moment.
The only moment I was like, I think it was, I wonder if he remembers me, is just like, that's the stick that breaks it's just what occurred to him in his mind.
One more embellishment.
That prompts him to... prompts him to cry. So I think it's almost like a throwaway line if I was to be, the writer doctor and be like, what exactly is that line for? And that bothers me a little bit because I'm like, well, thematically it could be tied to something. So, but who's not remembering him in this movie? Yeah, he's got some issues with like his legacy, but it's more of Ned is the one who's like, I am not remembered, if anything. But anyway, the point is that the moment is,
and I think it's kind
properly.
Of like to save the Ned thing, but Ned's dead, but he still wants to be a father figure.
They're trying
to have
him
all the touch the pregnant belly, and then she says in 12 years he'll be 11 and a half. Like he's going to be that baby's father figure. And I'm like, why? What did he do to earn that? But whatever.
Because Ned shouldn't have died.
Yeah.
Because Ned shouldn't have died.
So now that kid's going to be his surrogate son. Anyway.
Cut to screening a bit of the film completed 6 months later. We get that because the kid is like...
Classic, but it always works. We feel the adventure because we return home changed. There's miles in our shoes.
There you go. He's won an award that we see as he's sitting down, but he's not watching the film.
He's calm instead of angry.
Klaus's son or nephew, I'm not sure if it's some kid. He hands Ned's ring, which was like brought up in the films often as like, hey, when I was a kid, I was really into you, not just because you're my dad, but you're my hero. And the boy is about 11, which is, was cited in the movie as like a favorite age. It's like a perfect age. And then we get the last line in the movie, which is, this is an adventure, which is, I think, he's
reminding himself that you have to accept life as it comes. And I think that is a good reminder we all need. This is an adventure. It's just a ride,
Yeah. And just, he's off having expeditions his whole life. He didn't have an adventure with his life. He realizes now that life is an adventure, just relationships, and within, you got to experience that. And he refused to this whole movie. He finally gets it. Puts the kid on his shoulders, and he walks out while people are exiting his screening. We get slow motion. It's the trademark. You reference every film that he's done has done this. Credits run as the team all join Zissou one by one in a walk along a pier on his boat, or along a pier to his boat. They're off to kill another crew member, I guess. Wes Anderson stated that the walking sequence in the final credits is an homage to the Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai, which, I guess Jeff Goldblum was in that. I don't know why that's a reference, but it definitely, I was like, I've seen this before. And it's because the ending of that movie is just apropos of nothing. The whole cast is just now walking, even if they're dead.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the movie.
Well played, which brings us to pedagogy, which a lot of which is woven into diegesis, which I like that style better. But it means pedagogy can be short. I now think of it as, did you have more stuff left to say that you wanted to say? Yeah,
we talked about Ned's death.
Yeah.
I do want to say that, like, I think it's pretty, like, the sketch brain in me, I was like, man, deep sea documentarians as rock stars. That feels like a sketch premise, right? They're lifted up by a rich community of important people.
The main thing I wanted to say is, even more than the other thing I cited, this reminded me of, it's so, Archer. It's Venture Brothers, bro. Like the scenes where he's like, get him a red cap and a jumpsuit. Like, my legacy is passed down to you through my jumpsuit. It's repeatedly very Venture Brothers, which is not, right. I would never think of Wes Anderson as being interested in that edgy of comedy. But it is, like,
they came out of the same place because they were all the same age and they watched those B serials growing up.
Yeah. And comparing this to stuff like Archer and Always Sunny, I think is appropriate and surprising. Like, I didn't expect myself to be comparing this to Anchorman, but it totally is comparable. It makes sense. It's very funny. It is that funny at certain moments.
I agree. There's a few things I did notice that I was like, that's kind of cool execution. But one thing that I actually got, I guess I missed this the first time through after this rewatch, is that I was like, oh shit, now I kind of understand the form of the story a little bit better, about how much, and I'm surprised we didn't talk about this earlier, how much it's just about second chances. Esteban died. They're going back for the shark. Bill is abducted, so the plan changes, and now it's not an expedition. It's a rescue. Zissou wasn't there as a father. He tries again. It doesn't go as he expected, so there's a pivot. Jane is trying to find a father to live her life with. Like, the younger couple also represents, or I guess reflects, the better coulda, woulda, shoulda of of the choices of Eleanor and Steve's past. You know, like there's a lot of this kind of repetition through time, or this idea of like, we could have done it better. I have a second chance to make things right. And that's the heart of where like all the forgiveness arcs and stuff come from. But it's just crazy about when you start to think about how much all the arcs are really just about second chances. And that's something I didn't notice as much before. Oh, the locations are all Eleanor related. Have you noticed that? Like not to, if you, without the boat, which is very much like Steve's domain, like her island, even when they go to land to secure the,
Port-au-Pois.
The final moments in the hotel, or like the, climax, that like there's a reference. Zissou says at one point, like, I stayed in this hotel, with her, and that's why I remember this. So it's just interesting to me that the second chances arc, it didn't occur to me as much the first time through.
Eleanor is the living embodiment of, that no matter how much you fuck up, if you apologize, you'll get a second chance eventually.
Right. Which is kind of how Wes Anderson devises his films. There's this, and that's Baumbach too. There's this emphasis on like, I'm kind of pathetic. Please forgive me. Yeah. That's the nature of all that stuff. And it's interesting because I think P.T. Anderson is a little different. He doesn't kind of propose that. I mean, I guess like Punch Drunk Love is that, but I don't know if it's done in the same way.
I think it's really cool that we watched them back to back, because I got a lot out of comparing it to, as I say, Venture, but also Punch Drunk. There's a sequence in this where there's where there's like sloppy jazz drums as an action sequence plays out over handycam footage. Like we were just talking about that in Punch Drunk. And the magical realism, I think because it's PTA's most magical. Magnolia is, but in a grimmer sort of way. Punch Drunk is the most Wes Anderson-y, I think, PTA ever
And that
gets.
makes sense because that is unique to P.T. Anderson for being this is my dysfunctional love story, which is
right.
That's what,
I'm
whether
pathetic,
it's
please
familial
forgive me.
love, romantic love, that's what Wes Anderson does. Another thing that I noticed was that I liked I mapped out the constant electricity problems that are done by like all the times it happens in the movie, and every single time. Well, first off, I think it's a really good idea because it really installs early on, like its first few beats. It's like, this is a ragtag group of sailors. It's also about overreaching. All the upgrades and attempts to build a home in the ship, like make a home and an office out of this vessel. It's just too taxing for the power. So it says a lot already, like from jump, but it's also about the loss of sight. Because it's like the temporary blindness that occurs, which is obviously got some parallels to what they're doing thematically with Steve. But it's almost always during a scene where someone is not seeing, they say a line and they're not seeing about the truth of their hypocrisy, like a truth about themselves in what they're saying. And so mostly it's after Zissou's lines. But the final beat of the power struggle is when Zissou wraps up all the damages in his relationships and he's vowed to be better. And they're like, all right, we're going to go,
I love that
go take care of business.
And they're like, oh, good job. You get a trophy. It's just funny, but yeah.
And it goes off one last time, but instead of one of the crew members taking care of and like solving the problem off screen, he slams a wall and it turns it on again, as if the ship itself is reacting to him. So it's a kind of nice little rondo format. You get this little
cool.
There and back again, but also it's like I'm there and I'm back again and I've changed, and now it's like obeying me a little bit better. I thought that was a nice touch. Yeah. So there's that. With that, you know what? That's all I need to say about pedagogy. If you want to move on, because I know we're going long.
Well, then I don't need to point out that. Well, I just wondered when he's talking to Eleanor through the gate on Port-au-Pois, the sound is really uneven just on Bill Murray's side. There's a bunch of mic noise and not on her side, and it's jaggedly cutting back and forth. And you also mentioned earlier the way it was, quote, like uniquely shot, the shootout with the pirates. I think it's some of the worst filmmaking I've ever seen from Wes Anderson. I thought the pirate thing looks like they just got loose coverage as best they could. I don't like the sparkly gunshot effects. I don't like how everyone misses 1,000 times. Like I don't like the shootout.
To me,
I feel like Anderson can't shoot action.
It's like fucking Bullet, dude. It looks exactly like the shit that they're watching in the 70s.
So you're just saying it looks the way he wanted.
Intentionally. Okay. Yeah, it's taste. It's mimicking a form. But yeah, it definitely stands out and almost feels like when you live in a world of like beautiful sets and then suddenly you're taken out of it. It's like walking outside of a dark room and seeing the sun. It's like you can't, it looks wrong. It looks off. And I think that is something that I think Wes Anderson should have paid more attention to, is the contrast of those two things. Add their own like artifact / punctuation for the audience that you have no control of. And as a director, you need to understand you are to control all moments. And he's not doing that. I think he lost it a bit.
Well, and
but
I do think
that the sequence itself is very good. Like I think he's doing as good as Spike Jonze does in Sabotage. Like it's literally the same stuff.
Oh, man, I just don't feel it on a gut level, but I totally get the argument you're making.
Put Sabotage under that sequence and tell me if you feel different.
I also think that it's almost like, but I want to say that filming a shootout or action generally is its own skill set. And I do think like it's almost arrogant to think, oh yeah, Wes Anderson will shoot this just as good as the John Wick people, never having done a gunfight before, I don't know. I don't think you can do everything.
It's not good.
By default.
You know why? Because he's mimicking people who didn't shoot like as good as John Wick does. Like we have developed
Chad Stahelski or whatever.
Yeah, we've developed more like complex and nuanced lexicon with our shots in action movies, right? But back in the day when you're watching like what was on TV, action TV in the 60s and 70s, it looked like crap. All like you can tell they're fucking cap guns. It's like it's nonsense, but it was at the time what our suspension of disbelief would allow. And he's mimicking that format. So he's actually embracing the shittiness.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you're right. He could have shot it better, but I think he intentionally avoided it.
So, and I'll just say, like, I thought this film had 3 truly transcendent moments, which is more than most films have. The only parts that I thought were really bad were, I just think Wes Anderson can't shoot action, and it sounds like I'm wrong, or it just boils down to taste. So overall, really good movie. Problematic, but good. Simple but complex. I don't know. I like it. I'll compare it to Cyberpunk 2077 and I'll be done with comparisons. The story doesn't always do it for me at every turn of the screw, but dang, I love being in the world. I just love being in the world. And it is a very unique world, different than other film worlds I've been in.
I think it's his most developed world, which makes like that really sings. And that's why I want to live in it. And I think that his camera is developing in a really interesting way where he's actually starting to do stuff where it's like, camera dolly. I'm not just moving in and back and left and right. I'm tilting, creating new compositions out of other stuff that informs new stuff that says, oh, you're here. There's reveals and such like that. Spielbergian stuff, like stuff that I would say most filmmakers aspire to do. He's starting to do it instead he's kind of going outside of his comfort zone, which is, I think, also why we kind of feel that there's some roughness around the edges. Like when he goes outside and he has to shoot like the island stuff. The island stuff was some of the worst stuff that he's filmed in terms of aesthetically pleasing.
Oh yeah, but it's also hard to film outside.
It's hard to film outside. Yeah, so lighting doesn't look as picturesque. But he did have some cool shots of the French Riviera, like on sunset, where it is like, that doesn't quite feel like Wes Anderson. It feels like more like Soderbergh or Clint Eastwood, but it is beautiful. Yeah. And there's an imperfection by design about this movie that kind of allows like the ragtagness. You don't get that out of Royal Tenenbaums or Rushmore, where they're all rich people who live in rich houses doing rich things with rich butlers. It's like everything is clean. he dirtied it up a bit, and he kind of likes the grime. And I think it's better for it. And I think as he's developed more, I don't think he's developed as a writer. I think he's still chasing the same exact themes every time. And that's my personal thing, my hang up. I get it. Come at me. I know there's a lot of Wes heads out there who are like, Abe doesn't like this guy, and that's fine. I think he's developing as an artist. That's pretty cool. Speaking
of pretty cool, I don't know. You want to do the last bit?
Yeah, let's do the last bit.
Woo! This is Howdy Do Dat, which is just behind the scenes facts and trivia. I love that Bud Cort lost 50 pounds for this role.
That's why.
And he insisted on it. And Wes Anderson was like, you don't have to do that. And he was like, no, I'm doing it.
I feel like that was a part of something else where he's just like needing an excuse.
Yeah, because the pirates, you got to get skinny when the pirates have you.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that the jaguar shark was at the time, I think other than maybe Audrey 2 in Little Shop, was one of the largest puppets ever constructed. 8 feet long with 5 hand cranked controls, operated by 5 operators.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty dope.
Yeah, that's pretty dope. Robert Yeoman, who shoots all of Wes Anderson's live action stuff. I read an article about him talking about blocking. So the idea here is that Wes Anderson is much like the Coen brothers in that, if you listen to our other thing, Coen Brothers, which will return at some point. In that, Anderson doesn't rehearse and change blocking like on the day or on set. Like staging is set before they shoot or before they even rehearse. So on top of that, most of the time he shoots in one direction. Right? When you think of a Wes Anderson shot, you don't see a reverse.
It reminded me of how he shot After Hours, honestly, which is pretty cool.
So you just need like a wall, right? And you can just be very deliberate on that wall. You can light that wall and such like that. So here's the DP kind of reflecting on that point. Like he's kind of like, he's in the interview, he's like saying, basically, if you think of the flat space that Wes Anderson chooses for his shots, and if you think of that as a limitation, like a limitation a director arbitrarily puts on a shot, like using only one lens in your movie or shooting in black and white, it really frees you to do whatever else you want. So you don't have to light a whole house. And in this case, not even a whole room, just a single setup, basically. And he was talking about how Anderson, that's typically how he shoots. There's not we know what's on the walls. We know if we're lighting it special in any certain way. We know where the bodies are going to be, how many people are going to be sitting where. It's not like they figure it out when they get there. It's all pre-built. And that kind of preparation is more so than even most directors that you think would have that. They usually people build, I need it at least this big, and then we'll figure it out. And are they going to be standing up, walking? I don't know. I need the actors we need to rehearse and find out if that's true, if that feels right. Not the case in Wes Anderson. So, Robert, that's why I think you get the elements of control. And that's just, kind of the DP kind of talking about that. More about Anderson's process. He doesn't shoot with a lot of people on set. He likes to keep it small. And there's a quote from from Yeoman says, there may be 5 or 6 people there and everyone else is somewhere else. He doesn't want any distractions for the actors, particularly in a scene that's emotional like that. He was referring to specifically the scene that you were talking about with Zissou, who with Bill Murray kind of tearing up at the end in the submarine.
Still very subdued. We have a funeral for Ned and Cate Blanchett barely reacts. Obviously they were directed to, in this world, emotions are a subdued thing. But then when you judiciously have some, it has quite an effect. Yeah.
So from top down, Anderson is like, I want it when it needs to be intimate, which is almost always, I need the crew to be intimate. So, and it's interesting to me because it's very much like Zissou's filmmaking style himself. Like he wants the stolen moments, even though he's making a grand gesture, like all the stilted dialogue of yes, let's go over there. Yes, sir. I'll go over there. That's the usual text of what's Zissou is filming in his faux documentaries. But it's interesting because the subtext, it feel like what the director wants, as in Steve Zissou wants, is like, what if you called me Steve Z? It's that kind of stuff. It's like the stolen shit, the interpersonal play, the nuance of how they did it as opposed to what they did, which is like the heart of mumblecore and a lot of the writing that was coming out of this period. And it also informs the intimacy of the shoots. I'm pretty confident that, I mean, they all kind of came from the same place. They all knew each other. A lot of these mumblecore authors are also coming out of the same schools that Wes Anderson is coming out of, and they knew each other. So it's like, it makes a ton of sense to me that the idea of like, let's just do the intimacy of a shoot with just like 5 crew members and stuff like that. That then became the format for what came to be mumblecore movies. And I think somewhere in between, and the years match up, somewhere in between Tenenbaums and Zissou is when that started to hit the market. So early 2000s.
Yeah, 04 for this.
Yeah, but that's kind of all I got for How Do You Do That?
Well, all my stuff was about the puppetry and stuff, just because that's what gave me the most joy. I'm sad that they left out a fish called the Hydronicus inverticus, which was a puppet that could turn itself inside out. And it was deemed too magical realism. Like, they just decided it was too ridiculous. And they wanted to keep it slightly more grounded. But I would have liked the inside out fish puppet.
Yeah.
And the cross section of the Belafonte, the actual dollhouse we talked about, I just want to point out, like we said, the Jaguar shark was 8 feet long. That Belafonte model to do that dollhouse sequence was 140 feet long and 40 feet high, 4 stories high.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
That's awesome. Makes sense too, because they have to do like, there's like rigging
crank
on
the
top
camera
of the ship.
up and down and left and right and all this shit.
It's huge. So that camera's sitting on a 4-story, well, not 4-story, but probably like a 3-story tall crane at its highest extension, which I don't think they go all the way up. But like, we're talking, that's got to be like a Luma. That's bigger than a Luma crane. That's like super techno crane. That's crazy, man. There's only like 5 of those in the world. I don't even know if that's true, awesome. But there's not a lot of them.
And I own 3. And last but not least, just some IMDb trivia. I always appreciate attention to detail at this level. Probably was a costume designer's choice, looking for a way to use their creativity in their like domain, but could have been Wes, who knows, or could have been Owen. But Ned, throughout most of the film, wears a Rolex GMT Master, which is a kind of wristwatch popular with airline pilots because it automatically calculates time zones. And then in the last sequence, the helicopter sequence where he dies, he has swapped it out for a Rolex Submariner for obvious reasons. He's become a man of the sea.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's anything about, I don't know, because my son was a pilot and then he died in the sea and then I buried him in the earth. I don't know. Or like Ned is like
Elemental. Ned's like Final Fantasy game.
Well, there's like the bird fish thing. I just why is he a pilot and then
why is he of the sea? I think it's because that's another.
Oh, he's the opposite of Zissou at the beginning. That's why
he's the opposite, but he's also
he's
journeyman.
Of the sky. You're of the sea.
He's like, because I didn't have my father, I never found the sea. I existed in a landlocked, because he comes from Kentucky.
It's up in the air for me. Yeah.
So to him, he's got the spirit of an explorer, but all that he could explore was the sky.
That Kentucky accent sure came and went, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
It was a pretty loosey-goosey.
Which is interesting because they're from Texas. They're from Texas, so I feel like accents, they know a good accent.
Yeah,
but it really is kind of subtle sometimes, isn't it?
Wilson was quoted as saying that he based the accent on some actor's Kentucky accent, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Rather than basing it on a Kentucky accent, he based it on another actor who does a Kentucky accent.
Right. Yeah.
Whatever.
I mean, things are cartoons.
Yeah. Yeah. I liked this movie. I like doing this podcast.
I like this movie. We're really starting to see a lot of the coolest aspects and like what happens when you unleash the Anderson.
Yeah.
and so he's getting more confident than ever. You know, this is his biggest budget movie he's come to do. I want to see what his next movie is, just because.
Do you know what it is?
This is actually I don't know.
I don't either. Good. Let's yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's our next?
Just because
what's on the docket
first,
for us? What's PTA's
It's his first
next?
bomb. That's the whole idea.
And you're interested to see, always interested to see how an auteur reacts,
how it develops,
when they hit
how
their
you
first
react.
bomb.
Yeah, when you start, when you're at your fullest confidence, and then you get slapped in the face, and you're like, fuck. I think that's an important. That's important.
Dude,
right?
is There Will Be Blood next?
I think you might be right.
Because last was Punch Drunk.
2007's There Will Be Blood. Woo! So we've gone to 2002, Woo! 2004, and now we're 2007, baby. And we're going to start entering the phase, though, where we have to talk out like how exactly we're going to do Wes Anderson's versus P.T. Anderson. Because after There Will Be Blood, including There Will Be Blood, P.T. Anderson starts to slow down.
They don't alternate anymore. Yeah, right.
There Will Be Blood, and then there's 5 years. There's 5 years between Punch Drunk Love and There Will Be Blood, and 5 years between There Will Be Blood and The Master.
And then 5 years for The Phantom, and 4 years for
No. Then he
Phantom
does like
Thread.
3 and 4 for Master, Inherent Vice.
Inherent Vice is only 2. Yeah.
Yeah, but there are more Wes Anderson films than there are Paul Thomas Anderson, and there will be a reckoning in terms of the order of operations of this podcast.
We'll worry about that. All you have to do is stick around for the ride. Up next is There Will Be Blood, and people, Kingheads, stay tuned, and thank you for your patience, because we're close to rounding this out, and then we'll return with season 2 of Kings of King. So yeah, if you're just joining us or don't know about our other deep dives, we have a series on the adaptations of the works of Stephen King. We have one on the Coen brothers. I did one back in the day with Alex Schmidt on the books of Kurt Vonnegut. We do lots of deep dives into lots of different things. And you can find about all of them over at, do I need to do this? Or can people only? No.
I love it when you do it. I love it.
This comes out on the free feed. Yeah. Over at patreon.com/smallbeans. Well, sometimes I say that spiel and then I realize it's like a behind the paywall, so it doesn't matter. Like, they're already there. But you people, some of you have not chipped in, and we love it if you can afford it, if you could throw $1 a month our way. And for that, you would get all kinds of bonus content and episodes of different podcasts that we do. So go check that out if you're at all interested. Otherwise, just stay tuned for more of this. This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.